Okay, good morning team. So today what we're going to do is I'm just going to install Windows 2016. So this will be handy for our future classes when we're talking about Active Directory and other parts of the 2016 Active Directory infrastructure. So I'll also make another YouTube content or other video content available for anyone who's interested. But regarding Hypervisor, which is the virtual machine system that I like to use. You have VMware, you have VirtualBox from Oracle, which I'm not really that big a fan of, but I prefer to use Hyper-V Manager, and I will make another video content that will describe that and how to set that up. But right now, we have to just pretend, or we just have to emulate or simulate that we're going to run Windows 2016 server. I might make another part where we actually set this system as a domain controller. So hopefully this will all go well. There will be parts where we'll pause the recording because it's going to take some time usually. But this is the front part of the screen right here. So again, how to get to this stage will be another video on that. So we got to this stage, so we're going to install Windows 2016, and this is the first screen here. So we've got language to install. I like to just leave it as it is with the language. We can make some changes later, but with the time and currency format, because we're in Australia, this is probably an important step to have that as Australian, because the language, so like the currency we use is obviously the dollar, and we're in the Australian time zone, and date format is probably the biggest difference, because the US has they put their month and then they put the actual like if today's, for example, is June 16. So in Australia we'll have 16/6, which is June /21. As the Americans have, they'll put 6 and then 16. So time and currency, this is where you would need to change this to Australia. But if you're in the US or in another country, you could choose different systems. It's not a huge monumental difference, but we are in Australia, from where I'm creating this content from. So this is keyboard and input method. If you're using languages like Arabic or maybe even Japanese, where they use Japanese, they're using different keyboards and systems. But I think we're in the US now. Our keyboards have the dollar symbol, whereas if we were to go to UK, United Kingdom, they would use the pound symbol on their keyboards. Or if you're in a Europe country, you would use, say, the euro symbol. I think that's the major difference between them. I mean, there's other differences as well, but for our purposes, we'll just leave this as US keyboard. No need to put that as Australia, because Australian uses the dollar symbol and pretty much everything else that US keyboard has. So we will go to the next stage. We can use install now. Now, if our Windows 2016 system has some issues, we could come to the repair your computer option, and that's another subject, another topic. But we'll go into install now, and we'll just wait a few moments for this to do its thing. So it's just going to prepare the system folders from, we're just simulating at the moment that it's booting off a DVD or USB. So we've got some options here. Now, it's Windows, Microsoft is defaulting to the standard evaluation. So this is an evaluation file that I've got, an evaluation ISO. But in a real world, in an environment where we're going to get fully licensed, and it won't have the evaluation on this. But usually there's four different options. There's a standard, and this is the desktop experience, and data center and data evaluation. We're going to look at standard for now. Data center is for much larger deployments, but with the standard evaluation, we're going to look at two different types. Now, Microsoft defaults to standard. So what standard is, and I might be able to give you a visual example of this. It's going to pause for just a second while I bring that up. Okay, so I've just created a new screen here where this is what the core essentially looks like. So that's all we've got to work with here. It's just a command interface, right? So we can do, once I get the password right. Great. So now this is just a command line interface here. So if we want to go into PowerShell, I believe it's PowerShell, and then we've got the ability to configure this machine with PowerShell settings. So in part of the other content that I'm going to create, for the benefit of anyone who's interested, but particularly my students at Box Hill Institute, but this is freely available for anyone else who stumbles across this material. But I will be doing some PowerShell classes here in this system, and it's a good habit to get into where Microsoft Desktop is a great environment, and once you learn the tools you can do a lot of very powerful things. But PowerShell, and this is called the standard on the actual setup here, but some call it Windows Core. And essentially what we're doing here is we're not using the desktop interface. And the benefits of this is that it doesn't demand so much resources, particularly CPU and RAM performance. But whereas if we go into the normal Windows 2016 desktop, which is that one here, this one will be pretty much that's the interface. That's the desktop experience that we're looking at. Okay, so it's loading up all the the graphical user interface portion of deploying things, creating active directories and users. If we could, we'll just wait for that to load, so I can create different organizational units. So this is the graphical user interface version of it. And in the installation phase, we would, if we wanted the actual desktop experience, then we would select that one there. Now, again, it does demand more resources, more CPU power, and more RAM, but at the beginning level, this is a good start. And we can still do PowerShell and other command line interfaces here. But if we wanted to have a really stripped down version and do everything we can to evaluate the standard desktop experience, we can just select that one. But we're just going to stick with this for now, the standard evaluation. We'll click on next. Yep, we can accept the terms and licenses there. Remember, I've got an evaluation copy, so I'll have limited time. I'll have about should be, so I think 150 days, I believe, but we'll double check that later. We can do some disk partitioning here. If we're running on a SCSI drive, or if we've got a RAID controller, then we can add that into this. We can format. We can do pretty much all the disk management. Well, not all of them, but quite a few different types of disk management here. IT Essentials and A+ is something that I'm looking to create content, because I do teach IT Essentials, and I do have A+. That, and also, I would like to create some content for that, and it will cover exactly how to do disk partitioning, etc. But let's continue on. We'll just install. We'll let Windows take care of that. Now, what Windows will now do, and this is kind of the similar process that Windows 10 goes through. It will just install the files, features, and updates, and finishing up. So once all this is finished, there's so many different things that we're going to do later on. But for now, let us just wait for it to do this, and I'll just put pause. Once it finishes pause, we'll talk about the other things that we can do in Windows 2016 once the installation files once installation has finished. So now that all the files have been loaded, the system will restart. So this is a normal thing. We can, if we're not patient, we really want to get this going, we can press restart. If you've got a CD or a DVD placed into your machine, your physical machine, if you're not doing virtual machines, then take the DVD out or just wait for it. I do run through ISO. Now, if I was using a machine itself, I would use a USB stick, right? So you can just get just a normal USB stick and format it. We'll talk about that in another. We might create some other content, but just for now, today we're just focusing on Windows 2006 installing and doing the configuration for Windows 2016 so that it can be a domain controller. So the idea is that at the moment it's a fresh business, we're just starting out new, and the business or the organization needs to create some servers where they're it's just their simulation, right? So in this area here, we've got customized settings. So username is administrator, and I'm just going to put just a generic password, just something that has to meet some complexity. So a capital letter, a symbol. Now, if you're considering what type of passwords that you'd like to use, I'll just show you a really quick website. Okay, so this website here is called passwordgenerator.net. Now the idea is that it'll select it'll randomly generate a password for you. So I've got some advice for you. For the password length has it 16. Now that's far too long. The opinion of this website is that 16 is strong, and 256 characters, so that's the length of characters is unbelievable. But no one's going to remember 16. I'd suggest around about 8. I'd include numbers. Sorry, I would include system symbols and numbers, lowercase and uppercase. So these are important. Now, these characters are very similar and can be very frustrating for users. So I would deselect that. I would generate a password. Now that password looks horrible. No one will remember that. So I'll just keep generating. This looks a bit more promising, so I might, instead of that comma, I would do exclamation mark. So this password looks interesting. Remember, passwords, we don't want people to write them down on a notepad. So a lot of users will get a sort of like sticky notes, write the password down, and then what they would do is they would get their keyboard and put it on the back here. Don't do that. That's a very, very, very bad idea, especially as network administrators. Choose one password, and this will help you select if you're lost for ideas. Stick with this password, and when you need to change it, maybe where it's got the number 1, when you need to change it, press. My Kaspersky's trying to stick its nose in and try to change it itself. If I need to change the number there too, make it 3, 4, and so on. So that's a good idea. It's a little bit of advice. But let's go back to why we're here. We want to continue. So I've set up and everything's loaded. So I'll just press Alt Control Delete. Now in this environment, in a simulated virtual environment, that's going to take me a few seconds to remember how to do this. There's so many different types of virtual machines and they've all got their different systems of Alt Control Delete. I'll just be one moment while I locate that. Okay, so I've located it. It's in Hyper-V Manager. It ends up being Control Alt End. Control Alt End. So I'll do that. Now put the password in that we created. Okay, so this is good so far. Everything's so far so good. So we've got our system up and running. Do we want to join this? Yeah, we probably should do that. Now, the server manager will come up. So at the moment, we've got a Windows 2016 machine. Okay. So if we just wanted a web server, or if we just wanted a print server, or a DHCP or DNS. This will work fine, but the reason why we're creating this content is we want to create an Active Directory. We want to create a domain. We want to create a forest and a tree. And so at the moment, this is just a part of a workgroup. So if we go into Windows, right click onto the contextual menu and go into System, we can see that it's part of the workgroup, right? So peer-to-peer, no problems. It will work, it can do its job, server, but not what we want to do. And also the computer name here is just a randomly assigned by Microsoft Windows, right? So we want to change these two settings, but it requires a restart. Before we do the restart, the other thing that's very critical, we need to, at the moment it's getting its IP address dynamically. And if we go into, let's have a look at the command line. If we do ipconfig /all, then we'll see that we're getting some sort of, so I've got a DHCP server in the background in this virtual environment, right? I'm going to take this off and create a static IP address scheme, because your Active Directory must be static, because it's and this is true with all types of servers, also your router, other devices, where the best practice is if the device, the server or the computing technology is staying in one place and not moving around, and if it's being relied upon by clients or other devices that rely on this machine, you should have a static. So this is especially true with Active Directory. It needs to be static, but we're also going to put a DNS server on this as well. I won't put a DHCP server just yet, but it's a good idea. If it's a small business or an organization with say 10 computers or 100 computers, then this system itself would run okay with Active Directory, DNS and DHCP server, right? But let's change the settings. So we're going to rename this computer or change its domain workgroup. Now this is the first machine in the domain. And the first machine, so this is going to be the first computer that we're going to have. So we need to write the computer name. So I'm going to just write, I'm just going to be really boring on this one and just type lab. Now there is no domain yet, so we're just going to leave it at workgroup for now. Before we do that, actually what we'll do is we'll change the IP address. We'll do that first. So there's so many different ways to get access to to change the IP address. We can go to control panels. We'll change this to large icons, and then we'll go to network, which is network and sharing center. Change adaptive settings. Right click, go into properties. Double click this guy here, and let's just choose. We'll be boring. I remember when I was first training, my first instructor said that if you're going to use this in a professional organization, this Class C network, then it shows others that you're not a real professional at what you're doing. But we'll leave the default gateway as this, and the DNS, this is important. We need to make sure that if we're going to install the DNS server on this server that we're setting up now, we should put this down, or you could do 127.0.0.1, which is the home. But let's be simple. We're just, for the purpose of this class, we just want to make sure that everything's working fine. Alright, so we've changed the address. Now, as always, just because we want to make sure everything's perfect, let's just double confirm that everything is working fine, right? ipconfig all, and let's just make sure that it's up and running. There we go. So the static IP address is working perfectly now. We'll jump out of here. Now, just to show you again how I got there, right click the Windows in the context menu, go to System, and that brings it up. Now in Windows 10, it's one of the last couple of updates. They've taken that out of that. It's changed, it looks different, but at the moment with the Windows 2016 version I have, this is how we can access it. If you're struggling to find, if you can't see this anymore, or if it's somewhere else, if it looks different, Google that. You know, but the idea is, the theory behind this, so we need to change the computer name or the domain and work group. So we'll go to change settings. We'll go to change, and we're going to change this, but we're going to change the name. So remember, we're just going to call it a boring name just for now. That we're not going to put it as a member of a domain, because this is going to be the very first computer server in the network. We're just going to leave it as a computer group. If, however, if you're setting this up as a DNS or a web server or a file server, and there already is a domain controller, an Active Directory somewhere else, we can use that option there. So let's go to OK, and we're going to need to restart the computer, which we'll do. Now this should be very quick, so I won't pause. This should be a very quick process. While it's doing that, hopefully it's been been clear and there's no issues, difficulties issue. But anyone's more than welcome to post a comment and ask for some assistance if they require. So all right, so let's go into Alt Control Delete, which is Alt Control End. Oh, sorry, there. So let's put the password in. All right, great. So IP address is good. IP address is fine. The computer name. Let's go back into the computer system. Sorry, wrong button. Event Viewer was really good, by the way, but that's not what we're looking for today. So computer name lab. So that's up and running. We're still in the work group. We're going to change that now. But let's just go back and I'll just being pedantic, but it's, my father gave me a really good advice because he was an electrician and he used to cut cables, and he used to say to me, measure twice, cut once, and it's always stuck with me. So that's still good. The IP address has changed. It's not static. We're not going to worry about default gateway because we're not going to use internet in this scenario. Now let's go into now let's add Active Directory now. Just put pause for 1 second. Okay, so let's go into, so this is the dashboard, Server Manager dashboard. If you struggle to find it, if it's not there at the beginning, then it should be under Administrative Tools. We'll end up finding it somewhere. It's something that you don't really usually look for here. Or probably the better way to find it would be just to search for it, I guess. Server Manager. There we go. It's up here. There it is. So now let's go to Manage. We're going, or better still, it's right there in front of us. So let's just click on Add Roles and Features. So we'll need to add Active Directory, and we need to add DNS as well. Active Directory, it needs DNS to work. Now because this is the very first server, very first machine on the network, we have to add DNS as well. It has the computer name and it has the IP address. Now, if you forget that you had to do this, this is a great place to remind you what your address is. Okay. We're going to select Active Directory domain services. So I'm going to add the features. We're going to add DNS server as well. And I think we'll leave, usually I like to put a DHCP server in there, but we'll leave that for another time. A web server, if you want to do it as a web server, but for now, Active Directory domain services, and DNS server. They're very critical. We need those. This .NET framework, we should have that as well. It's just going to say, look, how great Azure Active Directory is. It's just some information. If you'd like to read, you can go and read that. Some more information saying about the DNS server, what it does briefly, and then install. So this shouldn't take too long, but we'll pause and we'll wait for that to install. Okay, so that was much quicker than I anticipated. So that's finished. It only took about 30 seconds to a minute in the end. I think the key is adding good RAM to the virtual machine here. I've got it as 4 gig, and that seemed to be really good. So let's close that. I'll close that now. Now we haven't finished. So Active Directory DNS is installed, but we've still got things to do. So at the top here, we've got a flag with an exclamation mark in a yellow triangle. Let's click that. Now we need some configuration, and this is really very important and very critical. We're still in a work group environment. Now we're going to promote this server to a domain controller. If there was another domain, we could add this controller, so we can have an Active Directory that exists in an existing domain, or we can create a new domain or add a new domain to an existing forest. Now these are a theoretical knowledge that we can talk about in another episode, I hope, but for now, because this is brand new, even if I only have one server, I need to create a new forest. And I'm just going to call it the lab. Okay. So this is the root domain name for this. Now I've missed out on something here. What I've missed out is the .com. So we're doing that, and that'll take a little while to engage or to do its thing. So in this section here, we've got the forest functional level and the domain functional level. So if you've got Windows 2008, 12 Active Directory servers out there, and they won't have the ability to do 2016 abilities, right? They don't have that technology. They won't work with Windows 2016. So we need to downgrade the functionality of Windows 2016 down to their level. You really wouldn't want to do that. You're better off upgrading those machines. But if you just need things working for now and you can't upgrade just yet, you can downgrade. But remember, the features that are in 2016 will not be available in 2008 or 12. So we've got the domain name server. So this is the domain controller capabilities. Domain name server. And we've got the global catalog. We've got the directory service restore mode. Let's just put a password. Again, these are topics for another time. We just want to get this up and running onto the system now. That's fine. Just ignore these messages for now. Go to next. NetBIOS, if they're really old, that's names back in the day, probably even before 2000, Windows 2012, Windows 2000. So we'll just leave it as the default. Let's just leave it as lab. And let that do its thing. It shouldn't take too long. It's already being used. Alright, so it really wants us to put the 0 there. So let's just put that 0. There are things where you do everything right and it just frustrates you. But we're getting there. So these are the 3 different folders, really critical folders, the database folder. So Active Directory is really just a really interesting and fancy and complicated database. So these are the folders where you just leave these as default. The sysvol sys volume folder is really important. So just leave them there. You do have the chance to put it somewhere else. So we'll just review. Now, something really, really cool. If you, remember when we were talking about the core here. So we can run PowerShell in here, but watch this. If I go to view script, that's the script for it. If I copy that and I put it in a notepad, which I will do now actually. I'm going to put that in a notepad. I'm going to, that will do everything for us. Everything we just did now, apart from the IP address and apart from changing the name of the computer, we could probably add something on the top of this. But you copy this, and you can paste that into the core, into this guy, and it'll do everything for you. That's really, really awesome. It'll make your life much easier as a network administrator. Alright, so we'll go to next. It will just validate and verify, and then now you might get a couple of warnings that this is the place where we can do some just verifying and just double checking to make sure everything is okay. So we'll just wait. We might put pause while it does that. It could take a few minutes. So there's a couple of little warnings here. I'm just going to go ahead and install this. They're just things that they think that we need, and so we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll just install that. So there's installation, some more little no, they're not error messages, but they're just notifying you. So we'll just put pause again and let it do its thing. Shouldn't be too long. So we've got to this stage where it says we're just about to be signed out. So this is looking good. And when we press close, when we click on close, this should restart, right? We'll do that and let it restart. It shouldn't be too long. Now, what will happen is when we come back in, we will be into our domain. We're going to log into our domain. So we're doing really well here. So we're going to just wait for a little bit longer. So this is looking good so far. We'll just wait a little bit longer now. Okay, so that took much longer than I anticipated. It got stuck on loading some modules, and it took about 10 minutes. I had given up on it, and I was in the process of creating another installation, but it looks like it got through in the end. So let's just move my face a bit. We'll go over this side. And now so this is a lab computer, right? And this is me as the administrator. So let's just put my password in there. So we're loading on to the domain for the very first time. We'll do some double checking now. Let's just get rid of that, and these will just do its thing. Yeah. So now we're up and running now. We're good to go. So if we go to tools, we'll be able to see the Active Directory users and computers. This is the first place that I go to do my work. And let's have a look. It might take a little bit of time to load the first time, but there we go. So lab.com, our domain, and this is where our users and computers are. In the next lesson that I'm going to prepare, we're going to create we will create some users, some groups, some organizational units. In a separate video, I'm going to do all this in PowerShell. So I'm going to jump into my trusty Windows core, and everything that we've just done now, we're going to do in PowerShell. But that might take me a couple of weeks to get to that. But if it's early, if I can do that much earlier, even better. See how we go. But thank you very much for viewing. To my students out there, you can ask me in class for any questions you have. For anyone who's just come in from the general public, you are more than welcome. You can please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will be doing a lot more content, free content, that I'm designing for students, but also for the general public. Just one more thing is that I'm doing this. There's a lot of preparation to go into it, but where not all of us can create material that's artistic and glamorous. But this is purely just for educational purposes, and we the intent is for students or anyone who just wanted to just set up the server and get things underway without having to dig too much into it. But please leave any questions you have in the comments and contact me. I'll have a lot more content a little later on. But again, thank you very much for viewing this content, and hopefully we'll see you soon.